Welcome, everyone, to the Civalgo podcast, the podcast that aims to give back to the construction industry advice, best practices, and insights. So today, I'm really happy to have with us Colin Chenet, which is a heavy equipment expert in the roadwork industry, I think forever. So, Colin, how are you doing today?
Doing good, Alex. It's a pleasure being on the Civalgo podcast, and it's an absolute pleasure starting the new year, and looking forward to our conversation.
Amazing. So just to remind everyone that the Civalgo podcast, if you want to help us in our mission of elevating the level of the construction industry, please share this podcast with your networks, as today we will be talking about having the right equipment to deliver the best productivity on our work sites. So maybe, Colin, just to start, if you can talk to us a little bit about your background and where you come from, that would be amazing.
Yeah, so I have been around the heavy equipment industry for my whole entire life. My father was a equipment dealer, the first working dealer in the United States. Their Forward became the first road tech dealer in the United States. And, through those years, I've learned a lot from him. And about 11 years ago, decided to, jump ship from my accounting degree to, go and work for him and help the construction industry. It was something that sitting behind a desk throughout my days was something that wasn't really exciting for me. So I talked to him and we made a plan to come work for him. And it's been, feet on the ground and running with it ever since.
Quite a journey, right? So I'm understanding that your experience with contractors is extensive. So maybe if you can talk to us a little bit about what's the day-to-day of an equipment expert in the construction and heavy civil industry? What does it look like?
Yeah, so I think that the day-to-day for me might differ from a paving and milling professional from somewhere else. We had a small, probably 20-person operation covering New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, and southeastern PA. And basically what I got calls for machine breakdowns, parts orders, pricing, and my favorite lunch meetings. But when you have to handle basically everything and be the person to push those questions onto somebody else, the calls vary from A to Z.
When we actually first met, we were in Germany at Bauma, where we learned about the best equipment and the best practices. And I learned a lot from you, actually. And you taught me that with your clients, you would always give them the best advice. Can you kind of drill down into why you are now the go-to guy of all of your clients?
So I think that what happens is when you walk into a guy's office who has been doing this for generations, you always want to be a person who can help them and answer their questions on the small things. I've never been somebody who pushes a product because that's where I work for. I see it as an art. And basically since day one, and I thank my father for this, I've been instilled the idea that if you can help this contractor do things more efficiently, he's going to be the first person to call you when he needs something. So yeah, I have done a lot of things where I've helped guys get products in their hands that technically aren't something I've worked with. But at the same time, I like to see people be productive, and in an age where you basically have shrinking margins, it's really important that people have the right products on hand, because that's the only way they're going to be successful.
That makes perfect sense, right? So it really caught my attention how you've made these immense relationships just because your intention, your goal is to deliver value, any means necessary. You want to help the people. And I think that's what you mentioned that came down from your father. And that's how, this wave effect has reverberated, and you created this massive network of people going towards you to get advice on different situations in the heavy civil industry.
Correct. I mean, Alex, it's, I get calls from guys who have questions about, how to tack coat and what product to put in their tank versus, what size drum they want to put in their milling machine, or, hey, I'm going to be running this 9.5 top on my paver. How early should I get the screed hot? It's something that it's an art form all throughout the process, and it's something that I really take pride in.
So let's dive a bit deeper into the equipment specifics, right? So there's a lot of technology around equipments, and we've saw some incredible new tech at Bauma in Germany, like I mentioned before. But what's your role in this new age where there's a lot of gadgets? Like we talked about the rollers, we talked about the screeders, a lot of new tech that these guys are, like I said, it's an art form, right? So these guys have been doing it for generations, and suddenly like things are changing. So what was your role as an equipment expert and specialist with those clients?
So it's basically understanding at the end of the day, A, the scope of operations of what this contractor is doing, B, the size of his operation, and then basically just trying to help him out. Because if you're going to be a contractor that's got 4 jobs going on and 3 milling machines, 1 paver, and 2, let's say, at now your distributed trucks, you have to help those guys realize their operational strategic efficiencies as far as moving forward, where to put things and which machine is going to be best for them in certain situations.
Yeah, it makes sense. You're the go-to guy for the strategic planning and making sure they have the right equipment for the right job. Not there to sell them equipment, but if they deliver productivity because of your advice, naturally they're going to also maintain this relationship. That's amazing. So maybe just to conclude on this first part. So what do you think is the specifics about like our industry and types in terms of an equipment expert, like heavy civil versus general construction? What do you think is particular to an equipment specialist in the heavy civil industry?
Well, I think that given the times right now, is you've got sales guys and professionals who go from dirt all the way to asphalt. And what I've done throughout my career is I focus solely on the asphalt equipment. And, it's very important for these guys with a time sensitive product to be put in the right position to make money. It's really hard for a guy who's working in asphalt to have, let's say, 10 trucks lined up in front of him and something go wrong. On the dirt side, maybe a pump goes and you need someone to go out and fix it. He's got a couple days. On the asphalt side, it's very time sensitive and you need that product to be put on the ground as soon as possible to maintain not only its heat, but for the people to maintain their productivity throughout the process.
And that's a great segue to the second part here of our podcast about like when planning meets reality and when a contractor is like panicking because something's going wrong and they're calling and they're saying that the equipment is not working. What's actually happening and how do you kind of help them out, right? Because 10 trucks lined up, that's a fortune right there.
Yeah. So I'll give you a little story is, years ago before telematics has really taken over, we used to send out product specialists or road technicians for a guy who calls us up at 2 a.m. and says, "Hey, Colin," or "Hey, my machine's down." And we used to go out there and it would be something as simple as an e-stop was accidentally pressed. So right now, the ability to be able to pull up something on your computer, whether that be your dealer, whether that be your inside technician, it really makes a whole lot of a difference because you can track these things and realize what the problem is before you send somebody out. Because you don't want to send somebody out and he's got the wrong tools on hand. And you also don't want to send somebody out and pay, time and travel for, an e-stop that's accidentally pressed. So, we've come a long way on what the machines can tell you as a contractor. And yeah.
Amazing. So again, you're always there to make sure that things happen and tech is increasing the level of efficiency and you guys can help them even faster right now. So I love those stories. If you have more of like anecdotes of like things that happened on the field, those are the crunchiest stories for the podcast. So don't hesitate. A lot of the times contractors are planning, right? They're planning
Mhm.
equipments and sometimes there's gaps between what they planned as productivity and what they're actually doing. So what was the biggest way to help the contractor when there was gaps like that?
The biggest thing from what a contractor expects versus what's actually happening is the total cost of equipment. I think that a lot of guys and girls, the issue is that they don't realize that a piece of equipment that you buy is going to have a 30 to 60% downtime or idle time utilization for that company. So when you've got a scope of different projects going on, you go out and buy a brand new paver, a milling machine, a tack truck, whatever it may be, you tell yourself that you can afford that monthly cost, but there's going to be an underutilization of that product over time.
So yeah, because it's not going to be running 24/7, and there's downtime and there's maintenance, right? So again, like on
Yeah,
the
I mean,
maintenance
yeah,
side.
yeah. So on the maintenance side, I mean, you tell yourself that there's a total cost of X, but you don't really tell yourself that there's a total cost plus transportation, plus daily maintenance, plus on-site mistakes that may happen that cause you to increase your downtime. The biggest thing in this industry, what people need to understand is that if you can become a company that's focused on prehab as opposed to rehab, your cost, your CapExes, everything increases, because if you're going to be the person who sits there and goes and looks at a job before it's going on, and you can see the obstacles that may be in the way, if you have your daily maintenance up to schedule, you're going to be ahead of the game. But at the same time, there's always going to be something that goes on, especially in the day of tier 4 final issues with, maybe a def header, goes. But to be able to go back on the prehab stuff is you have an extra def header sitting over at the shop that a guy can run up to you, in a couple of hours, rather than downtime of a day that may cost you the price of a machine for your monthly payment.
Absolutely. So can you talk about a story where like you gave some advice to someone on maintenance, and that it actually worked out, and they were super happy because the impact was there, and can you talk to us about a story where you really helped someone take knowledge about maintenance, because that's always something that's underseen. I mean, you're buying a brand new equipment, but these machines are working hard, right?
Of course. And I think I'm going to focus a little bit here on the milling side. Like I said, I always recommend guys to throw some extra def headers on the shelf. It's something that's going to save them a lot of headaches. But more so to kind of get more application specific. If you're running a milling machine, let's say, you have to understand what the job specification is. If I've got a guy running a certain milling tooth and he's doing an excavation job, let's say 12 inches, he's going to be running through that carbide pretty quickly. It's important for those guys to have the right teeth on the shell. And this is something that goes, I could extend this out to the size of the drum, the number of teeth that are on the drum, the type of teeth that are on the drum, and the guys who are operating the equipment. So a specific example would be, we were out on a job with a guy up in North Jersey, and he was doing a 7-inch cut, and he had a tooth that was a lower carbide that I would probably recommend for a guy who's doing a 2-inch mill and fill type job. The teeth kept breaking, and you could tell from the milling pattern, if you see some white lines behind, you've got some either tooth degradation, or you've got some broken teeth for that matter. Telling these guys to open up the rear moldboard to check the teeth, these guys want to move at 150 feet a minute, of course, or even faster. But it's really important that if you want to maintain a good pattern, you need to keep an eye on this stuff. So I had them open it up. They were disappointed in the fact that I was holding them up. But what they realized is, wow, all these teeth are shearing. What's going on here? And it was a conversation of, well, you have the wrong tooth for the wrong application. And the next night we had brought in a couple of boxes of teeth of a different brand or a different type of style. And we cut like butter right through that asphalt all night long, and it was great. So, it's little stories like that where you can help a guy out, and, he doesn't have to be calling you at 2 a.m. when you're laying in bed.
That's crazy. So you had to shut him down. So he stopped. He was upset at that moment, but how much time you think he saved on the end of it?
Well, I think that he probably would have called and said, we have a lemon of a machine, which is never the case. It is, it's always a matter of putting the right products into the right application. And, you'll hear me say the word application a lot, because it really is, it's truly the most important thing on a contractor who's doing asphalt, that's what they should be caring most about. So yeah, so they were upset. The owner ended up calling me and asked me, why that was happening. I explained it to him. And after, a couple minutes, they understood that, yeah, they were running the wrong tooth for the wrong type of job they were doing.
Yeah, you don't take a knife to eat your soup, right?
Correct. Or a fork for that matter. Yes.
Exactly. So, I mean, that's kind of the subject of our podcast per se, and I guess that also happens when people have projects to execute and they're actually looking for the right equipment, right? So, how about another time where you had to give advice to someone on which machine to buy to select? Sometimes it's a bigger machine, but again, I'm sure that it happened where you had to recommend a smaller, a cheaper machine for the right application, right?
Correct. And, this, Alex, is funny you say that. This is probably where I find that we are the most beneficial for the contractors is we get calls all the time. A guy is doing county roads. Maybe he's doing turnpikes and he's got a 10-foot paver. Maybe he's got a milling machine that's got an 8-foot, 2-inch head on it. And then he picks up a job to keep his guys busy on the off season. And he's going to go do a small parking lot, couple hundred tons. And they bring the same equipment that they usually use over there. And the first question to me is, why can't I get production? And it's because they don't have the right assets on hand. Yeah, I could speak on and on. There's a lot that goes into it. The paver might be a rear mount paver, when they need a front mount paver because of all the islands they need to be pulling in and out. Maybe they need a commercial size paver because of the amount of tons they're putting down isn't quite fitting, the project or for the paver. The guys on hand want to go, but you've got to be a little bit more strategic about your process of either pulling out the material or putting it down or even compacting it. So, there's a lot that goes into it. I mean, you could even look at the compaction side and, if a guy's doing a freeway or a highway and he's got a machine with a low profile side, questionable drum visibility, that's fine because he doesn't need to go up against a curb. But that same guy, he's going to mobilize a piece of equipment of a compaction side, a roller, and he's going to get to the job. And the guy's going to say, I can't even get up to the curb because I can't see it. It's those things that really affect your ability to be productive, basically.
That's crazy because I was a contractor, a paving contractor for 10 years, and the go, I know what you mean, right? We wanted to get the jobs done, but we didn't take the time to really adapt the procedures to have the best productivity. It happened, if I'm honest, right? So I guess if I would have utilized my relationship with my equipment expert, I could have got some valuable, advice. So, I mean, that's amazing to see. And you're definitely super knowledgeable in all of these different applications. But talk to us about how the productivity really, the advice that you give translates into profit, right?
So getting into profit, I think that when you have to think about a company, and obviously, we're talking about companies that maybe have 3 employees, an operator who's also an owner, and 2 ground guys who also going to run back and hop on the paver, and one of the guys is going to hop on the roller. When it comes down to profitability, I think that what it all comes down to is just having a trained staff. That's the biggest thing right now. Is what you see in the environment is we're getting more electronical from a machine standpoint. We are kind of moving out of this phase of, these guys who used to run cable driven rollers or pavers, wherever that may be. And you're looking for the guy who actually has been sitting at home playing video games all day. You need to get the right staff on hand. You need to have the right equipment on hand, and all your profitability, let's be honest, it comes down to downtime. And, it all comes down to your routine maintenance, having the correct stuff on the shelf, and having a dealer and relationship with someone who can help you along the way. I think that the idea of dealerships has really transitioned from someone who is going to be your right-hand man on a job and be there to, hey, let me throw you this product and I'll see you next time you need a machine. And I think that what we've done over the years is I'm there. A guy who can help turn some wrenches is there. And if you can't get that job up and running, you're helping them fix the problems until everything's perfect. And that's where the dealership slash contractor relationship really comes into hand, because you can't expect somebody to take a machine and be efficient with it on day one. It really takes a little bit of hand holding, and that's kind of what my background has been. And the profitability comes from there, comes from the maintenance, and it comes from the training of your staff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great approach. So would you say that you actually purchase an equipment? Because there's a lot of good brands out there, right?
Mhm.
Or do you actually select a relationship?
I think it's a little bit of both. I really do, and I might be biased, of course, being from the dealer side, but the relationship is important, but also the brand could help you, because there's brands of equipment that don't produce low volume equipment, and there's brands that produce volumes of equipment for volumes that you do thousands of tons a night. So I wish I could have that answer for you, but it's a little bit of mix of both. And if you can have the understanding about who your contractor and who your customer is, then you're ahead of the game as far as how you can help them. Because a guy who's going to pave, I'm going to use an example. A guy who's going to go on the local highway here and extend a lane over to a shoulder, let's say 8 feet, or I'm sorry, let's say 3 feet. You know, either he's going to put some things on his paver that can help him get those 3 feet, or maybe he calls you and rents something like a road widener that, you feed into just like a paver and extends the road, and you have the compaction equipment behind it. There's multiple ways of doing things, but it's about asking the person the right way to do something to be the most efficient. And that's where the profitability of a contractor comes into play.
Do you see any blockers to adoption when you're actually training these people? Because you did say it was like the number one item to the road to profitability is the training, but human to human, sometimes do you kind of feel there's blockers to adoption?
Of course. And that will always be, something that we deal with. It's if a guy's not used to doing something, you can't teach him to go hop on something and do something different, which is where that relationship also kind of comes into play is, to be able to talk to the owner or the project manager and let them know that before I get there, there's going to be some differences on what this guy's operating and how he's going to do it. And that's probably one of the hardest things in this industry to do right now, is to change a guy's mindset, because he's been doing something for so long a certain way. The last thing you want to do is ever tell them they're doing it wrong, because they're never doing it wrong. There's another way to do it more efficiently. So it's a really tough thing to walk around. But what I've found is let those guys kind of do what they want to do, because they've been doing it for so long, and they're professionals too. But to kind of nudge them in a different direction and say, hey, listen, I know you've been doing this way. What if I could tell you that you could probably go home a couple hours early if you did it this way? And that, something like that gets the guys a little excited.
Yeah, absolutely. Good for the contractor, good for the guys, good for everyone. That's a good way to pass the message. So we talked about maintenance, we talked about the training, which are both elements that are crucial if you want to kind of have profitability on your jobs. Do you have any more advice to help contractors budget and understand their productions so that they don't underestimate?
Yeah, I think that you basically have to look at your scope of jobs. You have to understand the amount of jobs you have, the equipment on hand, and the productivity of the operators on those jobs. So within that, you've got mobility of equipment going to different jobs. And, it's one of those things where if you could have something to track the performance of not only the idle time of machines, but how guys are producing on those jobs and who produces best on what machines, you'd be able to kind of, lasso all that information into one and sit there as a contractor and be more profitable. And of course, something like Civalgo, I know we have had conversations about that. And that's why you and I had hit it off so well. It's, you know, a lot of these guys have been operating the same way for maybe 60 years, maybe 20 years. The end of the day is that over the last 15, maybe 8 years, equipment and the information that equipment gives you has changed drastically. And what you can do with that information can change somebody who can go from, a standard, maybe he's making 8% to 12% on a job, but if he's going to run multiple jobs, he can maybe increase that up to 30 to 40%. So, with that being said, it's really trying to get these guys, we're going towards, I mean, you see AI, you see everybody using ChatGPT for everything. And the road building sector of the world has been statistically over the past after probably 20, 30 years, has been extremely behind. And I think now we're transitioning to this point where the guys who are using it are the guys who are succeeding. You can succeed without it, of course, but having all this information is king, correct? And if you can have it and utilize it to predict, how long a job's going to take, who's going to be there, who hops on what, how long the machine's going to go without, downtime. It really is, information is king, and it's kind of where we're going.
Yeah, it's definitely the game changer, and thank you so much for sharing your vision on what data will be bringing to the show, because
Yeah.
it's the next change that will dramatically increase productivity. And as construction guys, we were always looking, and because contractors are always looking for the next thing to be more profitable. We're not even talking about competition. So thank you for motivating our audience here on being willing to kind of go the extra mile and learn something new, because equipments are now getting more and more sophisticated, right? So
Yeah. And I think, just to cut you off real quick, I think it's not necessarily the equipment becoming more up to time. I think that the operators of this equipment, things are going to change. And to be able to foster an environment where adapting is more of a necessity as opposed to like a option, I think that's going to help every contractor.
yeah, absolutely. I do a lot of conferences on data and AI, and it's like having the data in a structured way is gonna be the only way to have recommendations and predictions, right? It's never a question of if, but it's more a question of when contractors are gonna adopt it, because everyone has to go on the new technology to succeed, right? So Colin, we talked about maintenance, we talked about productivity, we talked about relationship between an equipment experts and contractors. Do you have any last bits and pieces of advice on things that contractors should be willing to do, or maybe do something different before we end the podcast?
Yeah, I think that, a lot of this stuff is going to be a little bit what I've said earlier. To a contractor that has been doing this for a long time and understands his utilization versus a driveway guy who, every morning he could be getting a new job, or, doesn't quite understand what's his day to day the next day. I think it's really important to understand your timing versus actual utilization. So anybody can sit up there and say, hey, I can afford X amount of money a month to pay for this machine. And it's important for them to understand that there's other aspects that go into that, whether that be, like I said, mobilization every day, or maybe you have a fleet of guys who can move it and it's just a one-time thing. The ownership costs that go with that, your routine maintenance. And then, the biggest thing would be you're going to be on a job, and had you not spec'd it correctly or gone and take a look at it before you go and do the job itself, maybe there's that manhole that was hidden that you hit. These are all costs that go into ownership of a machine, and you need to prep yourself for the unexpected costs that are going to happen. But if you have the correct guys in-house who can, if you don't rely on a dealer to come out and say, hey, Colin, I hit this manhole. My drum is now a little bit, it's not cutting correctly. Can you send someone out tomorrow? If you've got these fail-safe plans in place for a guy who can call your field manager or whatever you want to call it and say, hey, listen, I'm looking online. The drum is not affected. We just have to change about 50 teeth. Now, on a standard 7/2 drum, you're talking about 170 teeth, which are, at this point, you're talking about, $7 per tooth, which can be pretty expensive. So if you can have somebody relay that information to a guy on the ground and, like I said, rehab that issue rather than rehab it, it's going to save you a lot of money. And then, some other things is, your availability assumptions. If you're a guy who's going to be running, equipment all throughout the season. So for here outside of Philadelphia, most guys run March till, almost Christmas at this point because of the weather has been kind of favorable the last couple of years. If you're going to be planning out your equipment rentals, maybe you decide I'm going to go lease a machine. These contractors need to know the availability, and you can't assume availability because of market structures. So, another thing I would say is just, make sure that if you have rental availability, like I said, build that relationship with your dealer. Say, hey, listen, I might need to be renting this machine in 2 months. What do you have available? Is this going to be something that might push me off my path of my job production? What are the rental rates? I mean, just like anything, a rental rate during peak season is going to increase. Just like anything in the world, when you need something and everybody else needs it, the prices are going to go up. So, plug in those numbers, make sure that something like that's not going to throw off your bid number or maybe how you structure the payments for that job. And then, the biggest thing is employee availability. If a guy's sick, do you have someone who can go in and take his spot? If a guy decides that he's going to go get married and he's taking 2 weeks off, do you have someone that can go and help him out? All these little things basically come to a spot where, once again, I think it's if you can track all this, it's not a problem. But when you can't, all these things pile up and create issues for the contractor.
Obviously, you're a source of knowledge and abundance of advice. On a closing statement, can you give us a last sneak peek of how you think AI is gonna relate to equipment and what's the future of equipment in the roadwork industry?
So, this is kind of a loaded question, and I'm sure there's going to be some viewers who disagree with me here. Once again, this is just my opinion. The quality of help has gone down, and basically, I think AI, what's going to help is it's going to help the contractor realize their utilization by jobs, their phase or crew, whether there's chronic underuse of equipment on a job or maybe equipment's being overused and you need to, figure out how to mobilize another piece of equipment in. The job capacities right now, especially working at margins where guys are, it's super important to get the right people and equipment on the job. And that project phase planning is something that I think AI is going to help with. The predictive maintenance, I think, is beyond important because, listen, if I have a machine that Alex, the notebook or the workbook, let's say, says every 500 hours, I need an oil change, right? If that piece of equipment has been working constantly under some kind of increased pressure, whether that mean the way you're cutting, how fast you're moving, that predictive maintenance via AI can do way more than what a standard operator's manual can tell you. And not only that, it's the planning. If you're a contractor that's got 4 jobs going on and you see the underutilization of, 2 pieces of equipment and you see that your job is falling behind on, a place 3 streets down, that AI can help you predict how to move the equipment, how to be more profitable. And, not only from a machine and personnel standpoint, I think there's a lot to go into with the personnel payment standpoint where AI is going to help out is, listen, if you're going to be a contractor and you're going to offer a guy 2 weeks off a year, let's say, he's going to take those 2 weeks, and he's for sure okay with doing that. That's why you give him those 2 weeks. If that guy's going to take those 2 weeks all at once, you need to be able to predict how your job's going to go without him. And sitting behind a desk, or, a guy with boots on the ground sitting behind a machine, it's going to be really hard to predict how that works. And I think AI is going to, hop in and say, hey, listen, Joe Smith, he's been running this dozer, he's been running this paver, and their production has been through the roof. Why don't you split his time up between these two jobs? We can also have Bob Smith hop on and, keep us above water, basically, or even improve the processes. And honestly, man, I don't have enough time to tell you where I think AI is taking this business, because it is going to happen. And like I said, historically, it's been a business that doesn't use technology. And now we're seeing a huge push for it because of the productiveness. And, I'm looking forward to seeing how the contractors accept it. That's going to be the first thing. But the guys who do accept it, they're going to be the ones who move ahead.
Yeah, there's going to be leaders, and the first two technologies, they're already there. I mean, we're seeing productivity increase everywhere. So, Colin, I'm so glad that you came on the podcast today and you were able to share not only your vision, but your take on relationship with contractors and how we need to move forward in this industry to be able to leverage equipment productivity tending to profitability. So if this is okay, honestly, we would share your contact info when we release this podcast so that people that are interested would potentially be able to contact you for some additional advice. So thank you, Colin, once again. Thank you for the network. Thank you for the audience. I'm super happy to be with you guys. Remember that you can share this podcast. It would actually help us in our mission to elevate the level of the construction industry.
Yeah, Alex, it's been an absolute pleasure to hop on here, and I really see where the Civalgo product is going, and that's why I've been more than happy to hop on and spread awareness about it. And like Alex, like you said, anybody has any questions, listen, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I feel like I can help someone, whether, from tack coat to milling to paving to compaction. I'm here for any questions, and I'm more than happy to help in any way.
All right. Well, thank you again, Colin, and talk to you soon, and good luck with all the projects going on.
I appreciate it, Alex. Thank you.